Hello, Michelle. Pity this couldn't be in person. We haven't actually met in person yet. Our initial introduction was online when Michelle was giving an endorsement, and I'm not sure if it was actually considered a keynote speech at our one of our projects in India, our teacher training project that had its certificate presentation put on about a month ago, and I was pleasantly surprised to find we had someone like Michelle who got involved. And from a Rotary perspective, it was a question of saying, well, if we've got people like this operating in India and Asia, perhaps it would be good if we actually knew each other and could learn how to tap each other's channels to get our projects working, and perhaps Michelle might have knowledge to drag us into certain things in places where we could be useful. So that was the thing. I did a couple of chat emails to Michelle, not while she was talking, but after she had finished, and we lined up this connection to present at our club. And Michelle, you'll be pleased to see we've got quite a good roll up today. We've got a joint meeting with the Rotary Club of Chadstone East Malvern, who've joined us, as well as our incoming next year foundation chair for district, Grant Hocking, and a couple of other people of interest as well. And Ishwar Pradesh, you might see there, was the actual instigator of that project on our behalf. Give a wave, Ish. So, but I won't talk too much more about it, because I'd like to hear what Michelle's got to say about her role and working in Asia, and perhaps some ideas of how we could end up working together. Now, just one thing I would say for a bit of protocol, with the number of people on board here tonight, it's going to be difficult to find people's hands if they're putting up their hand to ask a question. So could you perhaps just use the chat mechanism, send it through to me if you want to ask a question. I will have them in order, and then ask each person at the end when it's question time to ask their question. So Michelle, over to you to tell us about your role in Asia and how you think we can work together from your side.
Great. Thanks, David, and thanks, Matthew, as well. He and I had a good chat a couple of weeks ago about what a Rotary meeting looks like. At that point, we didn't know if it was going to be in person, which I would have loved to have broken bread with you, or online, but I'm pleased in being online. We're able to have members from Chadstone East as well. So maybe that's one of the benefits. I get to talk to a few more people this evening. So what I thought I'd talk to you about tonight, probably go for 15 minutes, and I'll talk about who I am and what I do. I'll just turn my stopwatch on so I keep a track of it. What we do in South Asia for the Victorian government, and then a few sort of ideas for Rotary, given the experience that we've already been lucky enough to promote and support for you as well. So my role is I'm the Commissioner for South Asia, based in Bangalore in India. I'm actually been home through the pandemic, but I'm normally based in Bangalore, which if you draw India, it's right down in the center of the south. It's the really big tech and medtech hub. Also the big hub for international companies, probably as much as anything, because it's in a beautiful environment. It's a very green city. It's a very temperate city, but it's also a very big city. So about 20 million people now. But in terms of what I do professionally, I'm what's called a trade and investment promotion professional. I've had a career with Austrade, so in the diplomatic corps for the federal government. And so I've previously held commissioner postings in Italy, in Milan, in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and in Madrid in Spain. So it's been a wonderful adventure for both me and my family. I've got husband and 3 kids. Those 3 kids did not spend any time in Australia until they were 12, 10 and 8. And then when I came back, I worked for the Queensland government, a little bit on the G20 for Brisbane, and then for the Queensland government, heading their international offices, which are similar, but probably not as widespread as the Victorian government. My earlier career is actually in classical music. So there is a piano in the background, or it's a little bit blurred in my Airbnb. So I was lucky to find an Airbnb with a piano. But that career was with major orchestras, so Sydney Symphony and before that Queensland Symphony, running their philanthropy program. So in fact, my first degree is in English literature. My second postgraduate studies are in philanthropy. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I ended up where I am, because I actually think it's a nice tie-in for Rotary and the sort of organisation that you are. So I originally went off to Italy. I think I spoke Italian. It was something I'd chosen to learn after I'd finished uni, and really just had a few of the core skills and the business skills that the Australian government really wanted at that time. But how I think I've been good at my role and able to develop a career from there actually fundamentally goes back to my childhood. And the irony of what I'm going to tell you is that I'm now in India in a regional community of New South Wales. So I grew up just north of Coffs Harbour, in a town then of about 2,000 people. It's actually Australia's and remains Australia's biggest Indian community. So the community now is about 1 in 4 Indians. When I was phoned up for the recruiters, by the recruiters for this job, I said, do you know what my background is? Do you know I have this background, close relationship with India already? And they said, no, we just were recommended to contact you. That was just coincidental. When I went home to my husband and said to him, I got this crazy call today. I got a call from a recruiter who was suggesting I apply for a job with Victorian government in India. And I said, you know, I've got 3 teenage kids. I can't possibly go overseas right now. And he probably regrettably now, his response was, you're the girl from Mulgunga. It's your destiny to go to India. So for me, firstly, what I wanted to say, and the reason I was so keen to talk to Rotary, is having grown up in a small community, I believe that the work that service clubs like yours does is so very, very important. And I've been the beneficiary, as have many of my friends from school, of programs, whether they've been run by Rotary, by Apex, by Lions, that they are really meaningful and they really do make a difference in young people's lives. Also in my career, we have a lot of people from the 1970s, they're sort of starting to retire now, the 1980s and the early 90s, who've been Rotary exchange students. I haven't myself, but I reckon probably in Austrade, there was a point in time where probably 1 in 5 people had been a Rotary exchange student. And what I like about Rotary is this international local focus that you have, because there's a sense of a worldliness, but a sense of bringing that home as well, a sense of empathy and a sense of cultural awareness and agility. And it's been, for me, growing up in this community, which was unusual at the time because it's quite remote, but you know, having this close relationship with this Indian community, which I think really spearheaded my career, because it made me much more culturally aware and agile than probably a lot of my peers at the time. I think that's changing now. You know, young people go abroad much sooner than we had the opportunity to. They have opportunities in their university studies to go abroad, but and the societies, you know, a lot deeper and many more cultures in it than there were when I was growing up. But I just think that that exposure and that ability to learn to listen, to be to look at things through other eyes was really vital to my career. And as I said, I really commend Rotary for all the work you've done over the years. So I thought I'd just now talk about what my work is. As I said, we're basically responsible for promoting the trade, investment and education relationship into South Asia. So my territory spreads from the Maldives to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Nepal and apparently Bhutan, but I haven't. But just so you know, I'm not normally off at the Maldives or on planes to those places all the time. It's such a massive market. We basically trim India down to about 7 states, most of them in the south, Mumbai and Delhi, and then a little bit of work in Sri Lanka, and some student work in Nepal and in Bangladesh, and probably a little bit more work in the ag space in Bangladesh coming up. As I said, I'm based out of Bangalore. We've got about 8 people in Bangalore, 2 in Mumbai, but I'm absolutely wrapped with this role that I think I have the best team that I've ever worked with in any country. And also for me, what's different to working for a state government to a federal government is I'm the only expatriate in the office. And that makes it a richer experience for me in you know, what can be a difficult environment like India. If you're surrounded by expatriates, you all get together and whinge about it on a Friday night. When it's just you, you just, you know, you accept your environment and you probably love it more. And within my team, I have 2 people who have studied and spent some time working in Australia. So that's in Victoria, actually. So that's a great benefit for me because, you know, when there's issues that might be a little bit sensitive, I can also reach out to them, as we had to this year with COVID, as we had a lot of our staff immediately impacted with COVID, and we wanted to bring some counselling into the team to sort of be able to say to those people, well, what's the right thing to do here? How would that be accepted? So our work, as I said, is growing exports and also inward investment. It's growing the education relationship, and in terms of inbound students, the region I work for has 4 of the top 10 intakes. This is a particular challenge now, and I'm sure you would have heard about that, not just for the international students who are here in Victoria, but also those who are remain abroad and can't re-enter the country. We do a lot on technology partnerships. So I mentioned Bangalore, where I live, is a big tech hub, but as is Hyderabad, another city in a neighbouring state of Telangana. We do a lot of collaborations between the tech industries in largely Melbourne and those 2 cities on EdTech, MedTech, AgTech, and as Matthew and I were speaking about the other day, and on gaming and animation. This is about capacity building, about creating relationships, and also about making sure that the Victorian market doesn't just see the world through a very Anglo eyes. You know, the markets of India, as you know, Southeast Asia and China are massive, and it's important through development for people to maybe look at their products and what they're developing and how they can fit into other markets. We do research collaborations. Probably the most successful of those that we've been involved with is in water and water use and road safety. So in road safety, some of the work that's been done by the roads department in Victoria in conjunction with Deakin University, has massively decreased accidents in the state of Tamil Nadu, where Chennai, or some of you might know it as Madras, where that in that state. In water, some of the work that we've done and has enabled a very, very big commercial project for the company Rubicon Water that's based out at Shepparton. They've got a job that is coming to completion with the Karnataka government, the state that I'm based in, for 800 kilometres of pipe, 3 irrigation, so of irrigation, 3,000 automatically operated gates to help better water usage of the agricultural land in the north of Karnataka. That project is, for me, a really exciting project commercially. It's meant that an extra 30 jobs in Shepparton, which is great, but also a great social outcome, but incredibly challenging. You know, you think when you're working with these companies, okay, how are they going to get the equipment up? How is the equipment going to be? What are the issues around certification? What needs to be built in India, assembled in India? What are the customs regulations to make the to minimize your customs exposure? So it might, you know, it has to do with how you might ship the products, or what parts you might get shipped, what parts you might get made locally. But with a project like this as well, it's also like, how do you train all the farmers not to muck around with the gates? And through all of the different languages that you have to work with as well, and how they're, you know, training the technicians all across this part of India to repair those. So what I guess I'd like to say is, we often think about export as getting a product on a ship and selling chickpeas or cosmetics or whatever it is we might be working on. But there's a lot more complexity in a lot of the work that we're doing in India. And in fact, it's that services end right now, which is really where the opportunities are. In other areas, we do a lot with sports and culture. I mentioned the culture side is pretty easy for me. It's a passion of mine, and I want to give a plug right now for the Indian Film Festival of Melbourne, or IFFM, if you want to have a look at that. There's a lot of free films online until the 30th of August. And for anyone who wants to grow their cultural understanding of the huge breadth that is India, there's some really wonderful films there, both, you know, many that are just 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, as well as features. I'm very keen, for those reasons, for cultural awareness, to try to get that festival that's operated very successfully for 12 years beyond the diaspora community, so beyond the people of Indian background, so that other people start appreciating that culture in the same way we appreciate, you know, the Italian or the Scandinavian film festivals. The other part of my work is sports. So I never thought I would know as much about cricket as I do, but I do. And we were meant to actually have some women's fixtures in India later in September, in Melbourne, but we expect them to be moved to other cities right now. They're meant to be in Melbourne and Sydney, but we use those events as we used the Women's World T20 World Cup last year in Melbourne, the last big event Melbourne hosted before the pandemic, to also mobilise groups of people to come down. So last year we brought in our first ever women's business mission from India. That's been absolutely fantastic. And we worked specifically in the area of gaming and animation. There's a lot of women doing great stuff in that, and also the business of sports, including hosting wheelchair sports people as part of that. And one of our people who participated in that, a broadcaster, just wrote to me the other day that she's got a really big gig now with the International Cricket Council. And it was really on the back of this program that she did with us specifically for sports, and just that it built her confidence back up. So we're looking forward to doing more of those sorts of events. And then a big part of my work is diaspora and community relations. The Indian diaspora in Australia is our fastest growing diaspora. I think it's about 700,000 people, and almost half of that live in Victoria. It's also, what people don't realise, our second biggest foreign taxpayer in terms of people of Indian background are our second biggest taxpayers. That's an indication that, one, they're paying tax, and also they're sitting in professions, is what we find. So the bigger group after that is the UK. So Indians, people of Indian background after the UK, good citizens, second biggest taxpayer. And this is a diaspora group we expect will continue to grow. We work closely with the federal government as well. Yesterday, I was talking to Barry O'Farrell, who's the current Australian High Commissioner. You'll remember him as former Premier to New South Wales. And you'll hear a lot on the news that India's putting together a free trade agreement. India and Australia are working towards a free trade agreement. I've been through these before in Malaysia. They're always interesting discussions. And then the federal government also has an Indian economic strategy, and we've just been talking with them about the refresh that happens on that. Probably the thing I wanted to talk to you about now is more sort of some of that person-to-person relationship, and particularly around India and COVID and some of the impacts. You've obviously seen the devastating impacts of this year, and I'm planning to go back to India in the next month. Things are going pretty well. We're planning on reopening our office. There's sort of a looming third wave up there, but I think at some point, you know, we just have to keep on going. But the impacts that we've had are specifically been really hard on our international students here in Victoria. So we had, of our 36,000 students last year, about 20,000 have remained in Victoria. Last year, again, when I had to come back to Australia, I was pulled across to run something called the International Student Emergency Relief Fund, because the international students are, because of their visas, they weren't entitled, and they still don't have any entitlement to any federal government income support. Some people are applying for income support because of loss of work. These students who can't go home to their parents because they're in country, and often, you know, helping to fund their studies through their allowable work, don't have any income. So the state government ran a $45 million fund, and which we rolled out in collaboration with the universities, who did some matching of the grants, to just give international students a one-off grant to really see them through and basically probably pay the equivalent of 6 weeks rent. Certainly the South Asian students and the Indian students were the biggest recipients of those funds, as well as you can imagine. So I am a little worried right now for that 20,000 remaining, just because the fund I ran has finished, and there's another fund sort of due to wind up. But it's just a group of people where I think, with international education becoming an industry over the last 25 years, we've kind of lost sight of some of those personal relationships. And, you know, there were many times, as sort of our family has been hosts to international students over the years, that I'd say to my husband last year, you know, if we had better relationships between these students and the community, right now the community would be reaching out and going, what can I do? But in fact, you know, because we were so closely following sentiment as well, you'd be quite alarmed actually at the lack of empathy by many people in the community for people who were really, you know, left quite unsupported, and young people very vulnerable and far from their families. So I hope that's given you a bit of an idea of what I do, where I came from, how I got here. And I'll talk a little bit more now about the engagement that we've already seen with the club from Albert Park. and both in market and back here in Victoria, where you might think about supporting further things going forward. Just in terms of what you already supported with global education services and the career counselling and training up there, I've previously been involved and, you know, attended the launch of one of those programs in Tamil Nadu in Chennai, coinciding with International Women's Day a couple of years ago, and at a school for underprivileged girls. It was one of the best International Women's Days I've ever had. I really felt it resonated, and the school students who were involved in that program really benefited. And I think that the work that's being done is really reaching a gap in the market, because there's a lot of work that I see going into communities, which is sort of just picking out a few kids and getting them into university or whatever. The programs that Raquel's running, sort of contrary to a lot of work that's done by international companies who are adjusting something that might have already been delivered in a foreign or Western market, is really targeting the broader group of young Indian people, which is a massive group of people who deserve more opportunity, and without sort of some of this training that goes into the back of her programs, are a bit sort of the victims of what we call a karmic culture. You know, you'll be what you'll be, and this just, I think, helps give them new ideas and helps drive their careers forward. So we're very supportive of that. Within my team, we've talked about other things, you know, other programs that we know, some good English language stuff we know going in, some kids programs, but I do think that what you're doing right now is hitting the right mark. Raquel has been a careers counsellor for Education Agent for a long time in India, and has then created her company back in Australia. And so she knows the market very well, the Indian market, and understands the need. And I think she's back in India right now. Other ideas that we had, just talking about the issue that we faced with the Indian students and we continue to face, is we're already looking through Study Melbourne to work with Rotary on something called Mentor Match. One of the real problems for our international students who come to Victoria is it's often very hard for them to not just get work experience, meaningful professional experience, because if you think about the way work experience functions, and I'm trying to do it for my daughter right now, it's often through word of mouth and connections, and they don't have those, so they find it really hard to get meaningful internships. So we are looking to work with Rotary and with people who are in businesses on a guided program to host and be mentors, but through an organisation like Rotary, also giving them more access to community. And that's, you know, one of the great experiences that I had as a child with a service organisation of getting involved with a bunch of university students who our town cared for a while. And so I think there's the opportunity for this program that's already in development, potentially for Albert Park Rotary Club or a combination of Rotary clubs to come in and potentially just be hosts for Indian or South Asian students, and to try to build that network as well. We've also got needs. One of our biggest issues right now is these students who remain in India because they haven't been able to re-enter. We talk a lot with the universities because these people are have been really patient. They're still paying their fees. They're doing everything online, sometimes at really inconvenient hours. They just really need something to look forward to as well. And what will it look like when they come back to Australia? And how can we fast track their experience in Victoria so that they are able to quickly build their relationships with community because they've lost maybe a year or 18 months of their studies. So that's another area where we'd potentially like to work on a mentoring program for some of those students as well. So that's probably all I've got to tell you about tonight. I hope it gives you an idea of what we do in India across the gamut of trade, investment and education. It's a great support you've already given in India and that we're incredibly grateful for, and I do think resonates with Indian young people in need, and just some ideas for engaging with the community back here as well. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Michelle. That was great. I was going to start the questions with one about your assessment of our project, but you've already given that answer just now. But just going back, fundamentally, one of the things that we did actually consider in adopting that project was the reach that it would have. And that was one of the, we set up our own methodology, which actually looks at how many people is it going to impact per dollar that we spend, so to speak. And this one definitely made it way up there in terms of the impact per dollar. Is just phenomenal on this particular one. Okay, our champion of the project, Ishwar Pradesh, had this next question.
Hi, Michelle. We did have an interaction at the awards presentation in Pune.
We did.
Last month. Well, Michelle, I'm not sure whether you're aware that the government of India has amended the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in September of last year. And a lot of NGOs or charitable organizations there are facing problems in regard to opening of bank accounts in the State Bank of India, which has been nominated by the government of India so as to monitor what comes in from overseas. I mean, I've got about $15,000 to $20,000 stuck here, which I just can't transfer to one of my projects in Bihar, one of the poorest states in India. I have a number of projects running in India, and you might be aware that there are 56 families that own 76% of the wealth in India that you're quite aware of. And in Bangalore, you're aware of Wipro and Infosys having this fancy thing. But nevertheless, I've traveled quite extensively around Hosur, Salem, Coimbatore, Chinna Salem, and all these places. And many of those rural schools, they've been crying for overhead projectors and photocopying machines, which they need. And now with the internet there available at the schools, they need to be able to pass on technology to the students, but without an overhead projector and photocopying machines, they find it very difficult to meet the needs of the students. So I was just wondering whether there's any funding available, because you mentioned that you're building education relationships, whether you have any funding to provide for photocopy machines or overhead projectors. The point is we can send them from here, but they get stuck and get stolen by customs in India. That's the general impression we have, and that's what's been happening. So I wonder if your office in Bangalore can really assist in providing photocopy machines or web projectors for some of these rural schools, the outlying areas, in places like Chinna Salem and places like that.
Yeah, Ishwar, I've certainly been to some of those schools, and I was in one probably now almost 2 years ago around Salem. No, it wouldn't have been as far out of Bangalore as Salem, but in one of those underprivileged schools, actually with Victoria's Chief Health Officer. We were guests of Biocon Foundation, and you might remember Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who's an alumnus of Victoria, is an alumnus of University of Ballarat, one of the most powerful people in biotechnology, not just in India, but in the world, on the back of her degree in brewing from University of Ballarat. And we were working with her foundation, just giving them some, sharing some materials really that we had printed in India for, on just sanitation and hand washing, and we were out doing some programs on that. In terms of funding equipment, we don't, it's not the area of the market that we're working for with the education sector, because we are working at that area for the students who we expect might someday come to Australia and someday come to Victoria. So the day-to-day work that the government funds isn't often related to charitable funds, and you can imagine if we did sort of the expectations that we'd have and the requests that we've had. But I can, we can ask around to see if there might be a partner organisation that distributes the technology and might be willing to fund its fund it coming in. So another not-for-profit who you might match with.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Grant Hocking, past District Governor Grant, did you want to expand upon the message that you sent? I know you broadcast it to everyone, but
yeah. Thanks, David, and thanks, Michelle, for your presentation. I was particularly interested in your comments about the international students, both here and in India. So obviously Rotary has good connections and strong relationships through our various programs like youth exchange and vocational training, and even our international projects like Ish just mentioned. Now, our district in the last 12 months been working with Outcome Life,
yes,
and has received some funding to run a program for mentoring international students. So it's in development, I would say, at this stage.
That's the exact program I'm talking about.
Oh, good. Okay, lovely. Yes, we're on board by the
Oh, that's
already.
great. That's great to know that it's your district that's already involved with that.
Yeah.
And I'll certainly, I'm just trying to remember the guy's name at Outcome Life. He and I had a catch up just more to discuss some shared concerns we have about employers not understanding visa eligibility, and you know, these students come down, they've got the rights to work full-time as a postgraduate, but you know, even like big companies, big tech companies I've spoken to in Australia are saying that they won't take any of them, and I'm going like, but we've got a labour shortage in Australia right now, you know, and they haven't adjusted their HR policies.
No.
But I'm pleased that it's Outcome Life you're already in touch with.
That's good.
I'll let them know.
So I just wondered, with your vast experience, whether you had any recommendations about what we should be looking at there, and what specific tasks, if any, we should be focusing on in that area.
Sure. The main thing I think with the mentoring project is anyone there is such a vast amount of international students that anyone who's got a need, the students can go online and actually sort of talk about what their degree is and what they're looking for. And there's such a vast number of students looking for experience. I think you can be quite specific. And to give you examples, when I was based in Spain for the federal government, I knew that Spanish was the second most learned international language in Australia at the time, but no opportunities. So I would get really specific about what interns I would take. And I'd say, okay, I need an intern that is can speak at least intermediate Spanish. So we would test them on the phone. So I need intermediate Spanish speaker. I need someone who's studying either international relations or marketing. And then we would, and they were quite specific, and I do the same when I have interns in India. We would create a project for them and designate a person in the office who was their buddy. Normally their first week would be spent doing something really awful, like doing a phone around, and that was in that market just to get them up and upskilled on speaking on the phone in second language, which can be quite challenging, but also just to test how resilient they were. And then we'd give them, you know, a really proper project that had an outcome within a period of about 3 months. But I think with Rotary, what I'm really interested in as well, and your ability to potentially as a cohort of business people support these people, is then how you engage with them and help them create a network for life. And that's what people should be leaving Australia with an international education. I was talking with the universities last week actually about, you know, the issues that we're facing right now. And they did say they felt that the South Asian students generally fit in a lot easier and find their way a lot easier in community than maybe some of the Chinese students do. And that's probably a lot related to language. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Interesting, because I think we are focusing on that broader aspect of, you know, culture and, you know, feeling like they belong to the community and all those sorts of things, as well as the workplace mentoring, the industry. So that's really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I really do think, Grant, it's the real thing that's missing in our education relationship, you know, and I attended a really quite confronting talk today with an academic, but two women who've been international students. And the theme was sort of like, have we talked too much about international students as an industry instead of a group of human beings? And I kind of know historically how that government position evolved, but it's been, it should have been changed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Michelle, just continuing a little bit on that mentoring thing and the opportunities for students to get them job placements that you're saying industry doesn't want to give them a chance. Do we need to start a program to actually work on the businesses? Because they're prepared to shift their call centres and tech offshore to India, to Bangalore. They know it's a tech hub, but then won't give them a work opportunity over here.
Yeah, that's my issue with it as well. So I think
it's a mindset issue.
And again, it's what happens when you take the human face out of an industry. And if we all got to know a couple of students each, and I'm constantly saying it to my kids who are uni students, to two of them are uni students, one in Melbourne and one in Canberra, like, how about you go out and try to make a friend with an international student and, you know, work a bit harder at it and think about the childhood that you've had and how much better it is when people reach out and open up. So as an industry, I think talking with the unis last week, we think the first step is really starting to humanize that relationship. And then I think through word of mouth, people, you know, they become less foreign, if you like.
Okay, next on the list, Mark Davies. You had a question. Is he there?
Unmuting seemed to be a bit difficult. Yeah, I was just interested in, you know, in a COVID environment, movement is obviously the ongoing challenge and relocating people from one place to another. So I'm thinking, you know, particularly in India, where it's becoming more technologically strong, how are the Australian universities engaging with India with online opportunities for online study? Is this something that's being pursued? And is this something that we should be thinking about as providing infrastructure, whether it be laptops or textbooks or other things internationally for these people to study online?
Sure. From that perspective, we've done a massive amount with EdTech in the last couple of years as getting to understand that industry and who makes decisions within it. And India's both got some huge EdTech companies as well as huge EdTech opportunities. And so universities like Deakin are doing a lot in this space and a lot on working with corporate clients, letting people do micro credentials that build up to an attainment. It might be a graduate certificate or something of that level. There are some limitations within Indian legislation about delivering in market, and that's sort of, there's been some issues around that, but I think we might see them changed a bit post-pandemic. One of the biggest things in India is they're going to completely skip laptops and go straight to mobile phones. So what's interesting for me is I arrived in India at the end of 2017, and I remember probably 18 months ago, just being stuck in the traffic somewhere and just seeing a guy in the back of a truck, like on a smartphone, and just thinking, I did not see that 2.5 years ago. For me, Mark, even the notion of pedagogy and how you change how people learn is interesting. How people are going to learn English through a mobile phone and through song and the apps that you have. And this was one of the conversations that we had to have with Rubicon on this water project, because all of the tech's done through mobile phones, and they're going, even the way they write the programs for, you know, this is the name of the part in English and this is the name of the part in local language. So there's tons of opportunities in EdTech. But the infrastructure will be mobile phones that they access pretty cheaply in market, actually.
So that keeps it accessible to a vast number of Indians, not just the wealthy.
Yeah, it's going to change. It's going to change. It's not going to make a whole bunch of people suddenly mobile, but it will make a whole bunch of people a lot more connected than where they were. And the next, you know, we are in contact particularly with trying to mentor and support young business women and in the startup sector. One of the ones that I was talking to the other day has got something similar to, you know, MYOB on your phone, but specifically designed for the guys who drive the two-wheelers, the tuk-tuks around India, so that they're properly recording their income and this sort of thing. So just the massive change we're seeing at that level is unbelievable.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like they're probably ahead of us.
They will be, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Matthew, you had a question to pass on.
Yeah, it was from Michael Hayes. He was asking, is there an equivalent commissioner or do you have a peer that focuses on Southeast Asia?
I do, and she's a very good friend, actually. So that's Rebecca Hall, and she has a really strong background in education. She's been previously Victorian Government's Head of International Education and then the Federal Government's Head of Education. So I'm happy to make an introduction to her. She's, like me, currently stuck in Australia, but due to go back, she's meant to be based in Indonesia, and she speaks Bahasa, and she's got good relationships there, but because of the COVID situation there, I think she's going to go back to Singapore in a couple of weeks and base out of there. But I'm happy to make that introduction if you'd like.
Thank you. Now here's one that's come from a Chadstone Smallville. I'm not sure if they're still on board enough to ask the question themselves, from Lyle Chasemore. And it's a topic that's close to our heart, about girl students in India and availability of toilets and coping with their monthly periods. We've done one with a Mumbai club that built new toilet blocks and also built a sanitary pads manufacturing and incineration facility at the school. But the question, one of the parts of the question here is, do you have any involvement with Rotary, especially Box Hill Central, which is not our district, who has the man who calls himself the toilet warrior?
I don't, but I'm pleased to know he exists, because what I was celebrating in the last 2 or 3 weeks is do you guys know the company Who Gives a Crap, the toilet paper manufacturers? Well, that company is an international company, but they were founded in Victoria, and most of their staff are still based in Victoria. So I was celebrating the fact that they just hit $10 million worth of donations for sanitation. I touched base with their founder, Simon Freeman, who's now based out of the US, about 3 years ago, and said to him, hey, like, I see this is what you do. Are you doing anything in India? Or let me know if you want to do something in India, because we'd like to promote it. I think on the back of there being such an incredible growth in the purchase of toilet paper and the purchase of toilet paper online, getting it home delivered, last year they just had a record amount of donations, and I know now that they are doing sanitation projects in India as well. So for any of you who don't know, one of the things that I love about India is there's a lot of social messaging goes out through movies. You know, it's a country that loves cinema. And the year I arrived, the really one of the big famous movies, and what I love is these movies have big action heroes as their stars, and big stars doing the voiceovers. And the movie was called Toilet, and it was about, you know, women and toilet issues in rural India. So it was their blockbuster. It comes all singing and dancing Bollywood. The next year, same cast, same producer. I hope I'm being true to this, Ishwar. The same cast, the same producer was Padman, and it was about issues with women's sanitary products. But the fact that you can put these out as a Bollywood blockbuster, I just love them, and they were both two great films.
Well, hopefully they got the right message across. But by the sounds of it, there is still a significant need for this sort of project.
Absolutely.
And maybe we need to join up with an organisation like Who Gives a Crap to assist with some of our projects.
Well, you can certainly, I think, pitch them to them. Yeah. Yeah.
No. Now, there was one other one from Louise and Paul from Chadstone East Melbourne, but I'm not quite sure. They said they had a question links to local community, but I'm not sure if there was meant to be more on that. Are they still online at all to ask the question?
I don't think they are.
No, I think Chadstone East Melbourne has dipped out.
Did they?
I think
they go to bed early, don't they?
They haven't all gone.
Haven't they? Yeah. Well,
they could say we were ridiculing them after they left, Richard.
Well, all I know is that a lot of our projects, the way we work, is working hand in hand with local communities over there. There's no other way to do it as far as Rotary is concerned.
Yeah.
So.
And if the question was about Indian and South Asian community groups in Victoria, I would also say they've been incredibly strong and incredibly useful, not just to the Indian students, but to the whole network of international students. I'm sure you guys would have seen the Sikhs. I can't remember what they call themselves, but who always do a lot of food relief. And through this last year, we have had students really dependent on food relief. We've set up free supermarkets for international students using the food charities because it has been very dire.
Yeah, the Sikh community kitchen has had quite a bit of publicity, thankfully, and very good publicity.
Yeah.
Messy. All right. From Passport Club. Have you got any questions, Jenny Foster? Have you got any questions from the Passport Club?
David.
Here I am. Sorry, I was just going to say, no, I don't. I was just letting you know, even though Chadstone East Melbourne left, we're still here.
You get extra points.
Three of us. And just to tell Michelle, 3 of our members of our new club are from Nepal. So very interested to, and we're building toilets for a primary school just outside Kathmandu at the moment. Great. And looking at an education program there. So was very interested to see or hear that you're also connected with working in Nepal.
Yeah, we also have a lot of students from Nepal. So probably about 3,000 or 4,000, I think, in Victoria from Nepal. A different profile to our university students, a lot doing vocational ed.
So the 3 of our members are leaders for the Nepal community here in Melbourne. Right. So yeah, it's a shame they couldn't be here because I think they would have really found.
You've got a new task is to drag Michelle up to Nepal, Jenny.
Okay, on that plane, not a problem.
Yes,
you might have to just go with her and hold her hand.
It's this joke with my colleagues. I have this habit of, it's called haiku for the anxious flyer. So I write these like Japanese haiku when I'm sitting on the plane to try to get my mind off a bad flight.
All right, now I haven't got any more people listed to ask a question, but
David,
Ish, I think,
can I-
did you want to say another one?
Yeah, David, personal question for Michelle. Michelle, how do you cope with the pollution in Bangalore? My personal experience, 3 years back, I spent some time in Bangalore, and I was staying at the Conrad near the MG Marg, and I got a pulmonary infection in Bangalore, and I was hospitalized in Mumbai for 12 days on ICU, and it was near fatal. So I'm just wondering, how do you cope with the pollution levels there?
I think the only way I cope with the pollution in Bangalore is being grateful that I don't live in Delhi. So I know there's somewhere much worse. But I will say, Ishwar, the last time that I was back, I'm lucky enough to also live downtown. So a few kilometres from where you stayed, and I walk back and forth to work because you know what the traffic's like in Bangalore. But when I was back last and sort of earlier this year, I thought I might not give this face mask away when this is over. I think this introduction of the face mask to walk to work is pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see if people hold on to them just because of the dust. I should say, actually, one of the projects that we are involved with from a commercial perspective is working with the Karnataka government on some of the work that Victoria's done on recycling and sustainability of construction waste, because some of our biggest pollution in Bangalore is related to construction dust, and just to try to get some better practices in that space.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions coming forward, yes, no? All right, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Michelle for coming on tonight. She's been very informative and instructive. Good to see that we've got such great people in places like this, in jobs like this. And I think from our perspective, gathered a few good ideas as to other areas that we can focus on. I think the ones that we're already working on, the education and sanitation, are still there. But things such as this mentoring adjunct to the education, which we can be doing at this end locally for the students when they are here, or the graduates when they're here, gives us some extra elements to how we do these projects. So Michelle, thank you very much. Our usual practice would have been to present you with a book from our book recycling program that we do here at Albert Park College. And might have been we could give you something suitable to read on a plane. But we'll see what we get. I think you said, are you still heading off on the 9th?
Maybe close to 18th, actually.
Oh, well, there's chance we can maybe deliver something to you.
Thank you. I'm reading a lovely book, guys, because as I said, I've got a degree in literature by Bill Bryson. You'll remember, sort of well known as a travel writer, but the book is called Home. And it's about how our homes have evolved. So I figured, given we're all stuck at home right now, this is the right book to read.
I'll ask you a question then. Have you read a book called A Gentleman in Moscow?
No.
All right, I'll see if I can get that to you. That'll keep you absorbed for one whole plane flight to India.
Thank you.
You won't want to put it down. Thank you for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure, and it's a pity we couldn't indulge you in providing you with dinner and drinks as well.
No, but lovely to meet all of you guys, and thank you so much for the support you've been giving in India. But just as I said, for the important institution that you are internationally and locally, and I'm also really looking forward to that Rotary convention being in Melbourne in a couple of years' time as well.